Hello and welcome. My name is Frances Billinghurst and I'm wishing to present this series on the Sabbaths, particularly from a Southern Hemisphere perspective, for that's where I'm coming from. For people who don't know me, I am an initiated witch in Turk contemporary witchcraft tradition. I'm author of some 7 books. I'm also High Priestess of a coven here in Adelaide. So in this presentation, we're going to explore the first spring festival or Sabbath, known as Imbolc. And you may have seen it also spelled with a G, or you may know it as Imbolc, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. But firstly, I'm just going to remove myself from the screen, as I would like to acknowledge country. I acknowledge the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, who are the traditional custodians of the land upon which I'm recording this presentation. In doing so, I pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. So let us begin. Imbolc comes from the Irish Gaelic word meaning in the belly, referring to the potential of all life that is in the belly of the Great Mother, or Mother Earth. It usually refers to the birth time of animals, in particular lambs and calves. Although here in South Australia, where I live, lambs are often born around the autumn equinox, which happens in March, to ensure that there is enough winter grass for them to eat. However, other parts of Australia, such as New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, and also New Zealand, Imbolc heralds the birthing season of lambs. As I mentioned earlier, an alternative word for Imbolc is Omelic, and this comes from the Scots Gaelic word meaning ewe's milk. Being the first festival of spring, Imbolc is usually celebrated around the 1st or 2nd of February in the Northern Hemisphere. However, here, south of the equator, it is usually celebrated around the 31st of July, 1st of August, or 2nd of August, or even when the sun moves 15 degrees into the astrological sign of Leo. The earth is in the slow process of returning back to life after the winter, with the first tendrils cautiously making their appearance. These early flowers push their way to the surface. Snowdrops, dwarf hyacinths, jonquils, such as this image of my garden, and even daffodils are appearing. Catkins are beginning to show on the seemingly dead tree branches, all signs of life force returning to the land. There's also a time of much uncertainty, as a sudden frost could kill the new plants, or they could run the risk of developing rot due to the last of the winter rains. Within the Australian bush, colour and scent has erupted as the acacia golden wattle bursts into flower. These golden balls tend to represent the returning sun, and it's little coincidence that they first start to appear around the winter solstice, which happens in mid-June. Originally, Wattle Day was celebrated on the 1st of August, around the time of Imbolc here in Australia, a celebration of this country's floral emblem. However, in more recent times, it's been moved to the 1st of September. The nights are still cold, yet the daytime temperatures are now beginning to slowly increase. Constellations like Scorpius here and Sagittarius are slowly leaving the southern skies and are being replaced by Orion and Sirius. The iconic Southern Cross, which is this one here, is pointing towards the southern horizon, and its pointer stars, Alpha and Beta Centauri, are above it. There are 6 zodiac signs stretching across the sky. Aquarius, the water carrier in the northeast. Capricorn is the sea goat. We've mentioned Scorpius and Sagittarius leaving, but also the less showy Libra and Virgo are also setting in the west. All the while, the Milky Way arches across the sky from the southeast, so the northeast to the southeast. The local Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains have a season that they call Kildare that lasts from about July through to September, so this includes Imbolc. This is when the ducks and water birds are nesting, and the people gather grubs, vegetables, and also gum from the Cailleach trees to eat. To the Ngarrindjeri people of the lower Murray River and Curong areas, this is the season of Ruri that lasts from August to October, and is a time of growth and mating, where birds, kangaroos, snakes, frogs all tend to get together. Up north at the top end, the local people await the arrival of Gungal, the time of the hot and dry weather that lasts from mid-August through to mid-October. This is the time for hunting snakes and long-necked turtles, while sea turtles come ashore to lay their eggs. And towards the end of the season, the thunder clouds begin to build up. The cloudless blue skies tend to stagnate the growth of the bush, and finding water becomes an importance. In the southwestern waters of Australia, the southern right whales have arrived in their breeding grounds, and from now until October, they can be seen from the shoreline. And Imbolc also marks the commencement of the breeding season for Australia's unique egg-laying mammal, the platypus. And this is a picture of the platypus for those who haven't seen one. This rather reclusive animal makes its home along the banks of the small streams around the country. Within contemporary witchcraft, the child born to the goddess at the winter solstice is now reaching adolescence, just as the power of the sun is starting to increase the number of daylight hours. The young god is now more focused on the changes that he is going through, and is not fully aware of those occurring with the maiden goddess. With each day, his own strength increases, and his horns begin to show as he evolves into the young stag, an earlier version of the horned god who appears later in the year. The goddess has now transformed herself from mother to maiden. The budding of the early growth echoes her own budding, and she reveals her virginal presence. She is young and playful, yet not naive. This is because she has been schooled in the female mysteries by the mother and the crone. This training reveals the sacredness of all mysteries, in that all three aspects of the goddess is actually one. And just like a young girl experiencing her first bleeding, her first moon blood, the maiden goddess becomes aware of her potential to become a mother. The maiden and the young god are the seed of summer, representing the potential of life within the seemingly barrenness of winter. This is similar to the ancient Taoist symbol of yin and yang, where within the dark half there is the nucleus of light, and in the light half in turn holds within itself the germ of darkness. According to English historian Ronald Hutton, one of the first written references of the word Imbolc can be found in the collection of Irish medieval myths known as the Tamak Emer. Here, the story of the wooing of Emer by the Ulster hero Cuchulainn can be found. In this tale, Emer sets the hero a series of challenges, which includes him going sleepless for a year. This year is based on a calendar where Imbolc is referred to as the, quote, opening of the 4 seasons, end quote, where it marks the time when, quote, the sheep are milked and the spring's beginning, end quote. Hutton further informs us that in the Sanus Commanac, a glossary probably produced around the year 900 Common Era, Imbolc originally meant lamb's milk, which is linguistically impossible. We also know that lambs do not produce milk, it's actually ewes. And if you're interested in any more artwork of Howard David Johnson, please visit his website because his artwork is actually extremely stunning. In the Northern Hemisphere, Imbolc falls around the 1st of February, as I've mentioned, and is often connected with the goddess Brigid, also pronounced as Brigid, whose sacred day is either the 1st or 2nd of February, depending on the source used. As with many of the Celtic goddesses, Brigid appears in a triple form as well as a triple goddess. Her worship spans both pagan and Christian religions, with many of the various myths and legends seemingly building upon each other. The word Brigid comes from the Celtic word brig, which is suggestive of power and authority. It means high one or exalted one. It can also mean fiery dart, from the Gaelic root brigol, which is the same root as the English word bride, an interpretation suggested by local author and Celtic artist Sinclair Wood. According to Sinclair Wood, Brigid manifests as lightning connecting the earth with the sky, regenerating the earth's fertility. She is the sudden inspiration, the generative spark within the soul and the imagination that inspires artists and poets. Sinclair Wood further suggests that as a manifestation of fire on a more worldly level, Brigid governs the forge and the blacksmith's art. Hutton, however, disagrees and states that despite that by the 12th century there was a tradition of an eternal flame being kept at Brigid's shrine in Kildare, the goddess was not usually associated with fire in legend. In Irish myth, Brigid is the daughter of the Dagda, the chief god of the Tuatha De Danann. She is the patron of poetry and crafts, including smithing, dyeing, weaving, and brewing. Patron of seers and doctors, a healing goddess who also protects women during childbirth. It is at Kildare, from the word Kildare, meaning church of oak, that Brigid had her sacred flame, in which a perpetual fire was kept burning in her honour. This flame was tended by a group of up to 19 priestesses, and due to the popularity of the pagan goddess, the Catholic Church canonized her as Saint Brigid, who had 9 nuns who tended the sacred flame. Within the Catholic mythos, the life of Saint Brigid is filled with many miracles, including her ability to bring life to the dead and the truth to a liar. Saint Calmness is also said to have prayed to her during his hour of need. Considered to be the first Irish abbotess, Saint Brigid is said to have founded her monastery at Kildare in 490 Common Era. However, there is some conflicting information and resources as to whether Brigid was an actual historical figure. But despite this, the cult of Saint Brigid spread throughout Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, and the Isle of Man. There's also reference of Mary of the Gales being connected with her, and connecting her with the Virgin Mary, who she is perceived to be the foster mother of Jesus. Saint Brigid's birth and childhood seem to also contain a number of pagan elements. She was said to have been raised in the household of a Druid, or maybe even her father was a Druid. And when his food made the young girl ill, she was fed milk from a special cow that was white when red airs. And these are the colourings of animals that belong to the Irish underworld. Her rejection of the Druid's food was because he was, quote, unclean, while she was, quote, pure, filled with the Holy Spirit. The fire symbolism is related to a story of the saint's early life, when Brigid's relatives saw a fire rising from the house where the child and her mother slept. The fire was magical, as if a burning bush encountered by Moses had appeared, for it did not consume the house or the occupants as they emerged unharmed. The sacred flame connecting both the pagan goddess Brigid with the Catholic saint can be likened to that of the ever-burning fire associated with the Roman Vessel Virgins. When the Normans arrived at Kildare in the 12th century, it is said that they found a fire constantly alight in the saint's shrine. By this time, 19 Christian nuns attended the flame, not priestesses of the pagan goddess. Except for a short time during the 12th century, where Bishop Henry de Lourdes extinguished the pagan sacred flame of Brigid due to his concern over its pagan connotations. It stayed burning until the 15th century, when Henry VIII purged the Catholic Church in Ireland. Then, on the 2nd of February 1996, St. Mary Mitchin, a Brigidine nun at Kildare, relit the flame, and it's been burning ever since. And in 2005, the statue that stands in the market square at Kildare now holds the flame of Brigid. There are many crafts that are associated with Brigid at this time of the year, in particular the Brighid Doll, which is made to welcome Brigid into one's home. It's a traditional Irish custom where a corn dolly is made by the young girls or unmarried women of the household or village to represent Brigid, either as the goddess or the saint. The name Brighid is said to mean either the young Brigid or little Brigid. This doll is adorned with ribbons and colourful pieces of material, and a bed is also made for it to lie in. Then, on the eve of Brigid's Day, the household stays up all night with the doll, and they are later visited by the young men of the community, who must ask permission before they enter the home. Probably more commonly associated or known are the Brigid crosses. These crosses are believed to have originated in the Connemara in Western Ireland and were traditionally made from reeds, rushes or straw. The reeds were braided into a rope and formed into a circle, which was believed to hold protective powers. Over time, the circle became likened to a swastika cross and is believed to also be a representation of the sun or a fire wheel. Once made, the cross would be placed over the doorways of the houses, stables and barns for protection and prosperity for the coming year. One of the earliest references for a Brigid's cross dates back to 1735, where it recalls the power to protect the house and the occupants from fire. And the poem goes, St. Brigid's cross hung over the door, which did the house from fire secure. This Gideon thought, O powerful charm, to keep a house from taking harm, and though the dogs and servants slept, by Brigid's care the house was kept. And in my book, Dancing the Sacred Wheel, I've given instructions as to how you can make your own cross. In the Northern Hemisphere, Imbolc is the time when the healing wells are often decorated with spring flowers, and wells such as Chalice Well in Glastonbury, Non's Well in West Wales, as well as modern wells in Cornwall. It's not unusual to find trees such as this lower picture, tied with pieces of cloth or ribbon or string, and these pieces of cloth are known as cloties. The use of a clotie is a form of Cornish folk magic, where the strips of material are tied to the branches of a tree that overhang wells believed to hold healing powers or properties for specific ailments and illnesses. The belief is that as the cloth rots, so too does the illness. This is a similar practice to that of the Buddhist prayer flags, where as time passes and the prayer flags rot due to exposure to the elements, this process releases the prayer flags, or the prayers contained within the flags, which are then carried off into the wind. This custom used to be believed to have little impact on the natural environment. However, many of our fabrics these days, including our ribbons, do contain polyester or other forms of plastic. This is now becoming an issue, especially with the local environment, the local inhabitants, the birds in particular. So if you are wishing to carry out this form of Cornish Welsh magic, please choose your fabric very carefully. Use something like calico or anything that's 100% cotton. Just be cautious or be aware of your impact on the land. These other two pictures, the picture on the left, the main one, this is in Kildare, this is at Brigid's shrine. And here is a statue of Brigid holding her sacred flame, and you can see she's got beads and other tokens, photos wrapped around her as forms of prayers and offerings. And this is her well at Kildare. At this time of the year, we'll almost have this battle going between the last power of winter and that of the coming spring. And in Scottish myth in particular, this is seen as the battle between Brigid or Brigid and the Cailleach, the hag of winter. Scottish folklorist Donald Mackenzie tells this winter, or the tale of the winter hag, the Fhéile Bride, having captured the beautiful spring or summer maiden bride and holding her prisoner in her mountain hall, which is beneath Ben Nevis, the tallest mountain in Scotland. The Cailleach's appearance is as bleak as winter itself. Her skin is blue-black like the winter storm. Her white hair looked like twigs covering the frost, and her single eye glared out on the world, excuse me, like the cold winter sun. And the story goes that she gives Bride a task to wash a brown fleece white in the waters, and it doesn't matter how many times that Bride tries to wash this fleece, it does not go white. Then one day an old man took pity upon her, and he shook the mantle 3 times, and it turned white as snow. In doing so, he revealed himself as Father Winter and gave the young girl 3 or 4 bunches of snowdrops, telling Bride to present these to the Cailleach the next time she was scolded by her. And when this happened, to tell the Cailleach that she found them in the green rustling fir woods, and that Chris was springing up from the spring banks, and new grass was beginning to shoot up in the fields. So Bride returned to the cave in which she was held by the Cailleach. And when she was scolded by the Cailleach, she told him what Father Winters told her to tell her. And the Cailleach flew into rage. Summoning her 8 hags, she told them to ride to every direction, smiting the world with frost to kill all the flowers and grass. So out rode the 8 hags on their shaggy goats, as the Cailleach stormed across the land, wielding her black magic hammer and causing a great tempest to lash at the ocean and spread terror everywhere. Now, the reason why Brid's been held captive was due to a dream that the Cailleach's son, Angus, ever young, had when he saw Bride and fell in love with her. And Angus was everything his mother was not, the gentle warmth of the summer as opposed to her harsh wintry cold. And the Cailleach knew that if Angus and Bride were united, her own days were numbered. Angus lived on the green Isle of the West, the Isle of Youth, and he'd asked the king of the isle about this beautiful maiden in his dreams. And the king replied that the Cailleach knew of their marriage, and that it would mark the end of her reign, and that Angus should wait until the flowers bloomed and the grass grew before setting out to rescue her. However, Angus was a impetuous youth and did not want to wait. So he borrowed 3 days from August to cast a spell upon the land and on the sea, causing the sun to shine and the weather to be fine. and he searched and could not find Brigid, who was locked in her cave. And he continued to search until one day he came near to the forest at Ben Nevis, and this is where he found his love. And the story continues, and he ended up battling his mother, and eventually he won out. And the Cailleach made a last attempt to defeat Angus and remain her wintry dominance. She gathered her hags to herself and smote the clouds with her magic staff, creating the Black Tempest. Winter continued, and the Cailleach reclaimed 3 days from the winter to balance the 3 days that Angus had previously borrowed. And these 3 days were the worst of all. They were the Tempest spirits riding black hogs, while the Cailleach was free to wreak final devastation. And in those 3 days they froze the land, and many people could not survive this unexpected bleak cold. But finally Angus overcame his mother, and she was unable to fight against the power of new life that was rising up in every vein of the land. So she fled to the Isle of Skye, where she sat upon the summit of Old Wife's Band at Broadford. There she was gazing across the sea, waiting until the day and night would become once again equal. All that day she wiped the tears of sorrow for her lost power. And when night came, she went westward over the sea to the Green Isle, where at dawn the next day she drank the magic of the waters of the Well of Youth. And though some claims that she was turned into a standing stone, others state she's still waiting there for the seasons to return, where she can rule. Imbolc also is referred to as Candlemas, and in some traditions of the craft it is still called Candlemas. This is named after a Christian festival relating to the purification of the Blessed Virgin, where 6 weeks or 40 days after the birth of Jesus, Mary and Joseph took the baby to the temple in Jerusalem in order for Mary's purification after childbirth to be performed, in accordance to the first law of Moses. Candlemas, therefore, is referred to as St. Mary's Feast of the Candles. It is believed that the connection of the candled headdress that is often associated with Candlemas can be traced back to St. Brigid, as on this day immediately after St. Brigid's Day, according to Irish folklorist Kevin Dunneth. Because of Our Lady's indifference in bringing their infant Jesus to the crowded temple, St. Brigid promised to help her by distracting the attention of the multitude. She did this by appearing in a headdress bearing many lighted candles. In gratitude, Mary declared that St. Brigid's festival shall be celebrated on the day before the purification of the candles. This purification theme may have originated from the belief that Imbolc is the festival that marks the goddess's re-emergence from the underworld, after giving birth to the sun god at the winter solstice. It is a time of transition between the old and the new, as well as a time of purification, which was often symbolized by fire. The act of passing through 2 specially kindled fires, or even jumping over one, is a form of purification, referred to as seining. And I'd like to end this presentation with this blessing of Brigid or Brighid. I don't know the author, can't recall if it's something that I've adapted myself, but Blessed Brigid, burning bright, lead us through the dark of light. Bless our hearts, our lives and home. Walk beside us so we're never alone. Triple goddess of the forge, encourage us to keep our words, to walk with honour, strength and love, with your blessings from above, healing those who call thy name. By your will, bless this flame with inspiration, love and light. Blessed Brigid, burning bright. And blessed Imbolc, wherever you may be.